Hey, this is Miss V and welcome back. We're here for a new unit called Industrialization. This is Q3, Unit 3, also Unit 10. But here we're going to be getting into Lesson 10.1. So let's get started. Alright, so this is your challenge. I challenge you to try to get to at least level 3, which is being able to describe the agricultural and technological innovations that led to industrialization in Great Britain, and then how it spread to continental Europe, the United States, and Japan. So we're going to kind of break those down little by little, right? So just for this particular lesson, if you're able to identify the causes and effects that led to industrialization in Great Britain, that's great. But if you're able to describe those technological innovations that led to Great Britain, to industrialization in Great Britain, that's even more awesome, right? And these are the guiding questions. This is going to guide our entire unit. We're going to come back to this question, but basically looking at how innovation affects our way of life and how does a revolution bring about change in our society, politically, socially, economically, just overall in our society, right? Alright, so let's get started with talking about industrialization in Great Britain. So we're going to focus on Great Britain first, okay? And then we'll move on to continental Europe and United States and then Japan, alright? Okay, so your question here for number 1, where and when did the Industrial Revolution start? It started in Manchester, Great Britain, during the 18th century, the late 18th century, which is the late 1700s. Okay, so when I mentioned industrialization, just remember that industrialization is the change from a mainly based or agricultural based society, and it's now moving towards a factory manufacturing based society. Okay, our society is more technological society, of course, because we don't have those factories and machines anymore. It's more done on computers and tech and so forth. But during this time that we're talking about in Great Britain, they moved from less farming or having more farms or agriculture towards a more machine-based, factory-based manufacturing society. Okay, and there was reasons for that. As you see here, your next question for number 2, there were 4 factors that caused the Industrial Revolution or industrialization in Great Britain. Those 4 factors, as you see here, and I have them highlighted, one of them was the Agricultural Revolution, which increased the food supply. The Agricultural Revolution, which I have for number 3, a question for number 3, was the move from subsistence farming to commercial farming. So what does that mean? Subsistence farming means when a family or a certain society grows crops for their own personal benefit and survival. So that means if, for example, if I had a farm, I would have a farm right in my backyard, and that farm would take care of my family, and I'm growing food just for my family. That's called subsistence farming, okay? Commercial farming is different. Commercial farming is when you farm to make a profit. You're farming as a business to make a sale. So it's not just if I have a farm, I have a large farm, and that farm is not just feeding my family, but it's feeding other families, and I'm trying to make money from feeding other families as well, okay? So that was the move here in terms of the Industrial Revolution. That Agricultural Revolution allowed for a bigger food supply, right? And that allowed ordinary British families to spend money on manufactured products instead of having to grow food in their own backyard, right? So that's your first factor. Your second factor is, of course, the population grew because now there's more of a food supply, right? More food means that parents can feed their children. If they're able to feed their children, they're going to have more children. And that's how the population grew, okay? The third factor, as you see here, Britain already had sense of capital, or ready supply of capital. Capital being money, okay? And that came from the Columbian exchange, trading, different goods and services, and also the slave trade, okay? They were able to have tons of capital, and because of having that amount of capital that they gained from those industries, they were able to invest that into new machines and building new factories, okay? And now this growth of an entrepreneur society is able to grow and build new businesses because of that ability of having more money, okay? Your last factor is that these supplies of new businesses and new markets, that gave way for the demand for new products and new services and new goods. So there was a growing demand for cotton cloth, and that led these entrepreneurs and business owners and manufacturers in Britain to look for new ways to try to increase their production of cotton cloth so that they can meet the demand of having that cotton cloth, right? So they didn't want to have to pay hired labor anymore. They wanted to be able to get out as much cotton as possible so that they can meet the demands for that cotton, okay? And as you see here, this was one of the ways that they did it: cotton production in new factories. They built new factories, but they also built new machinery, okay? So as you see here, Great Britain, they were able to surge far ahead of other European nations in the production of inexpensive cloth goods, which was called the cottage industry, okay? And like I mentioned, in Great Britain, there were inventions like you see here, the spinning jenny, right? And the water power loom, which is powered by water, right? And that helped to weave the cloth together, right? It made the production faster, but it wasn't as efficient as for laborers, meaning that it wasn't as productive. Efficiency means that it's done in a proper way, okay? So yes, they were able to make the cotton production faster, but it wasn't done in a quality format for as the laborer side, as a laborer would have done it by hand, right? So they knew they had to come up with other inventions to try to make sure that, one, it was not only faster but more efficient, okay? And that's what they're going to do later, especially with number 6, as you see here. The improvement of the steam engine is going to dramatically increase cloth production, and also it's going to increase cotton imports because of the steam engine, and allowing that process to occur so that they can become faster and more efficient in creating cloth products. All right. All right. So this is number 7, 8, right? Parts of 9, and I think that's 10. Yeah, I think that's 10. I think that's 8. Yes, that's 8. So here we go. So 7, 8, 9, and this is 10. Okay. So here we're talking about coal, iron, and railroads. So as I mentioned before, the steam engine allowed for the transport of cloth and cloth imports to happen very quickly. Now, if they're using steam engines in factories, right, they're going to need something in order to help have that engine work properly. That increased the demand for coal, because coal was used to fuel the steam engines, right? Also, coal was used to produce the high quality of iron, as you see here, used to build those machines. So Henry Cord developed this process called puddling, and it used higher quality iron, and then iron production increased by almost 20 times more, okay? And puddling is basically it's smelting, different forms of iron together, and it produced a higher quality iron that they were able to use in these machines. Okay, so with the success of the steam engine and iron making technology, that allowed for the development of another big invention which is a huge success for the Industrial Revolution, because now that is bridging cities together. And that, of course, was the railroad. Okay? And that played a key part, because now products and goods and so forth are not just able to stay in one area. They can transport it to faraway cities, right? So number 9, the first steam locomotive was developed by an English engineer, Richard Trevithick, right? Richard Trevithick, and began running on a rail line in 1804. So that's pretty early. If you remember 1804, that was when Haiti became independent. So we're kind of around that time. The Haitian Revolution was happening. France was having their issues, right? There was a lot going on. There was, Latin American revolutions happening in Latin America. So Spain was having a lot of trouble. So this was the perfect opportunity for Great Britain to spring up and really have a lot of progress in their society, right? So as you see here, because of the invention of the locomotive steam engine, goods are now cheaper because transportation is less expensive. What that means is that beforehand, in order to get milk from one place to another, someone would have to travel to maybe out in the rural area where the farming was, purchase their milk, and then go back to where they were located at. Cost a lot of money. However, with the advancement of the locomotive, they can place milk and other goods and services in ice boxes, or in a chilled capacity, and transport tons of them to different cities. And now a person wouldn't have to spend as much money going to a farm to purchase milk. They can just get it from the same area that they're in, because the locomotive was able to deliver it. Okay, so that led to an increased demand for more factories and more machinery to buy goods. All right, and as you see here, this is Richard Trevithick and his first locomotive engine, steam engine. All right. So this is 11, 12, and 13. So with the development of manufacturers and factories and so forth, the development of the factory system changed labor practices, as you see here in this picture, right? Because now business owners are going to need people to help maintain and make sure that the machines are working as they're supposed to, right? So many people from the rural areas, from farms and so forth, they started to work in these factories, and they had to adapt to performing these new tasks and repetitive tasks in these long factories, and they had long hours working in these factories, right? But not only that, this led to, which is your number 12, this led to a period of time called urbanization. Urbanization is when many Europeans, especially in Great Britain, this also happened in the United States, and we'll get to that later. Many Europeans moved from rural areas, farming areas, and they moved into the main cities so that they can go to work in these factories. But it was a big population boom that happened. And that's your number 13. Okay? Lots of people started to move in to the cities, right? As you see here. These are tons of people here for work, right? And because of that, this is going to lead to very poor living conditions, because now all of these areas, they have to find places to live in such a small space. Okay? Because there's so much factories that are being built up. They're going to have problems, right? So urban reformers called on local governments to try to improve these conditions, but that didn't take place until much later, okay? Because they're noticing that these cities are now becoming clustered and almost claustrophobic, and it's causing problems. Also in the actual factories themselves, there are poor working conditions as well. So not only at home do they have poor living conditions, but they also have poor working conditions. All right. So during the Industrial Revolution, as you see here, a new economic system rose in Europe called industrial capitalism. Okay, and now there's two social classes that's going to emerge. And industrial, if you break that down, capitalism, of course, is allowing to have a business, and you have your way of earning capital, right, or money. From supply and demand, right? And industrial, of course, is by manufacturing. So it's a manufacturing type of economic system, okay? And two social classes emerged from this economy: the industrial middle class, right? And then the industrial working class. The industrial middle class, which is your number 15, were those people that built the factories. They developed the markets, and they bought the machines because they are focused on wealth. Okay, they are focused on making sure that they are developing these factories so that they can get more money, and the more that they invest in their markets, their demand for the factories, demand for these goods and services, right? The more that they invest in it, the more wealth they will obtain, all right? Whereas you have the industrial working class, which are working in the factories, right? They're working in the factories. They're working over 12 hours a day, sometimes 6 days a week, working for very, very low wages. And then there's no promise that they are there. They're not tenured, or meaning that they don't know if they're going to be there forever and ever. They're not guaranteed a job, okay? Which was problematic. Okay, and that working class is going to be a big thing that rises up out of this system, and you're going to see that later. Okay, and as I mentioned here, conditions in those cotton mills, in those cotton factories, and especially the coal mines, were extremely dangerous and led to a lot of conditions, health-wise, and just psychological issues as well. Okay. This is 16 and 17. Women and children did work in those cotton mills, okay? However, the Factory Act of 1833, that set the working hours for children. So before, children were working as little as 5 and 7 years old in factories. But when Great Britain passed this Factory Act of 1833, that forbade children under the age of 9 to work in factories, and also it set a certain working hours. As you see here, this is actually the factory working notice for boys in this case, and their time periods in terms of how long they should be working, right? Yeah, so little boys were working. Women also worked in the mills, and they received only half the pay that men were working. And women also performed the lower paying jobs that could have just been done at home, but they had them in the factories working as well. So that's your 16 and 17. Alright, this is 18 and 19. So because, remember, I just mentioned to you that the working class is going to have issues with all of this stuff that happened. Poor conditions, poor living conditions, poor working conditions, low pay, right? Long hours. So that working class is going to need and want a system that focuses on their rights and their needs. Thus, the economic theory of socialism sprung up in response to these poor working conditions in Europe. And in socialism, the government usually manages and controls and owns the means of production and distribution of goods and services. So that appealed to workers, especially the industrial working class, because now the government is stepping in and controlling how the production of what a production would look like, right? And what the hours should be, and what the working conditions should be in a society, all right? So intellectuals then created this early socialism, which they they called it a utopian socialism because of its ideal nature. The idea is that workers would be compensated and based on having a government controlling the things rather than individual businesses controlling the way manufacturers handle their business or handle their production and transportation and so forth, right? That was the ideal. Now, did it happen that way? Not necessarily. Okay. So number 19, the socialist movement did influence European governments, and they created social supports as old age pension and unemployment insurance. This is where we get our stuff today. In the United States, we have pension, you have retirement, we have unemployment insurance. So if you lose your job, this is where it comes from. You will go to the government, and the government handles that for you until you're able, for a certain period of time, of course, you get unemployment pay until you're able to find a job. Okay? So when we think of socialism, it's not necessarily something that is a dependency on the government. No, it's not. It's a structure that was put in place to help the worker. That was the ideal. Okay? Something there to make sure that the worker is compensated. The workers that are working in the factories are protected. Okay. Now, like I said again, not all of it was as ideal as they wanted it to be, but that was the premise. That was the idea. All right. So this is your lesson. This is your lesson, yes, but this is your activity to do on the back. You can use this map to help you. I made it much bigger so that you can see the map clearly. Answers those questions on the back of your guided notes. And I will see you in the next lesson. Peace.